sort of the next part of the morning, we're going to hear from NOFA, from rural Vermont, from a farmer who is a NOFA farmer. Then we're going to hear from the Farm Bureau and some Farm Bureau member, and then the agency. And then we'll break for lunch. With that, good morning, Addie. Welcome back.
Hi, it's nice to see you all. Thank you, Chair Durfee, for convening this meeting in the off season. We're really grateful for that and for all of you for listening to everybody today. I want to keep my remarks pretty brief because there's a lot of us on the agenda, as you just heard, but I do want to provide some reflections on behalf of NOFA about some major changes facing our community right now. In particular, I want to speak to the ongoing drought, the upcoming extreme surge in healthcare costs, and the impacts on farm workers and Vermont's immigrant communities more broadly. So first, the drought, as you're all aware, and some of you are experiencing personally, despite increased rainfall and even some snow in the last couple of weeks, we are still in the midst of a historic drought. 6 of 14 counties are currently facing extreme drought conditions, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. And on the heels of 2 years of catastrophic flooding and following an extremely wet spring that delayed planting, drought conditions this year have already cost farmers an estimated $13.5 million, according to the Agency of Agriculture's Drought Impact Survey. That number represents millions in lost crops or severely reduced yields, animals, and in some cases, whole herds sold, millions of gallons of water hauled, and hours of farmers' time spent hauling it. It represents yet another season of farmers pivoting, adapting, and figuring it out, and another season of economic, physical, and emotional strain for the people producing our food, providing jobs, and contributing so much to our state's economy and our communities. There are farmers in the room today, here and on Zoom, who can share their personal experience and the support that they need from the state to continue farming as extreme weather conditions persist, and I thank you for taking the time to listen. I also wanted to take a moment and thank this committee again for voting to pass S60, the Farm and Forestry Security Operations Special Fund, out of your committee earlier this year. Please continue talking with your colleagues about S60 and advocating to provide robust funding for the Farm Security Fund in the upcoming legislative session. The state has a substantial interest in securing our farmers' futures, and failure to support their recovery and survival puts Vermont's food security, rural economies, and climate resiliency at risk. I also want to take a moment, you're going to hear more from Missy, who's on the screen, about this in a few minutes, but to address the significant and disproportionate impact that upcoming changes in healthcare costs are going to have on Vermont's farming community. Access to affordable healthcare is and has always been critical to farmer success. As self-employed people, farmers are more likely to rely on the ACA Marketplace or Vermont Health Connect here for their health insurance, more than the average person. Nationally, 27% of farmers and ranchers rely on the marketplace for healthcare, which is more than triple the national average of 8% of the rest of the population. Many farm workers and farmers in our community also rely on Medicaid or Medicare and will be significantly impacted by the changes to those programs in the coming months and years. Lack of access to affordable healthcare is already a barrier to many people getting into or staying in farming as a career. Talk to almost any farmer in Vermont, and you'll quickly learn that hundreds of farm businesses and households are structured largely around access to healthcare, and that farmers are struggling to keep employees because they can't afford to provide it. These dynamics cause real impacts on a farm's ability to thrive and grow. They stop people from getting into farming as a career who otherwise would like to, and they have major compounding effects on our state's agricultural economy. We've heard from farmers recently who are considering leaving the state or the country in order to access affordable care. And on a human level, we're deeply concerned about the physical and mental well-being of many farmers who will continue to farm, but who will be forced to go without health insurance next year when premiums double or even triple. We all know by now that this is nothing short of a crisis in the making, but we also know that there are options for long-term solutions that support everyone, and it's time to get serious about those. Speaking of which, lastly, I'm really grateful to know that you're going to be hearing later today from Naomi Wolcott-McCausland, who runs the migrant health programs currently based out of UVM Extension, including Bridges to Health. Bridges to Health provides direct healthcare support to over 1,000 farm workers on farms across all 14 counties of Vermont. as well as supporting families in accessing food and other basic needs. It is an essential resource to ensure those working on Vermont's farms and in dozens of other professions can access the care that they need and deserve. The program is facing serious funding challenges and uncertainty, largely as a result of federal policies, and may be forced to end if funding support and a long-term home for the program aren't secured. NOFA Vermont is requesting on behalf of the population served by Bridges to Health and the broader farming community that this committee support a state appropriation in the FY 26 Budget Adjustment Act to ensure that their critical work can continue without interruption. Thank you again for your time today. I am happy to answer any questions, and thank you for supporting the success and well-being of everyone in Vermont's farming community.
Thank you, Maddie. Just before we turn it over to Missy, you mentioned in just a moment ago in the testimony that nationally, 27% of farmers are participating in the marketplace or something comparable in other states for healthcare access. Do you know anything about the Vermont number?
I don't have statistics specifically on the farming population in Vermont. I do know that Vermont, of any state in the country, is going to see the biggest increases of any state with the expiration of the ACA tax credits. And our
dollar increases.
Can you just say that again?
Vermont is going to experience the biggest cost increases of any state in the country because of the expiration of the ACA tax credits. And also, I don't know if anybody was attending the VBSR legislative breakfast last week, but there was a stat that came up during that meeting that since 2018, healthcare costs around the country have risen on average in other states by 12%, and in Vermont, it's been 92%. Which I think we all probably experience directly to some degree. And yeah.
This afternoon, Mike Fisher is planning to be here. He's the healthcare advocate, and he's the my go-to guy for questions about like that. I don't know that he'll have data by sector, but it would be interesting to know if anybody's listening, whether we know, what percentage of farmers are participating in that. If it's okay, then Missy, can you hear us?
Yes, I am here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. And if you would, I guess, just introduce yourself to us and tell us where you are, and then we're interested in hearing whatever you've got to share with us.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Missy Axelrod. I'm a farmer and educator in Roxbury, Vermont. Thanks for the opportunity to share my story and my concern regarding the recent changes to the Vermont Health Connect insurance plan costs. My spouse and I are both independent workers. We farm and create art and farm-based education programs here in central Vermont and throughout Vermont. Our work contributes to our local food system, the world economy, the cultural fabric of our community. Like many small-scale farmers and artists, our income fluctuates seasonally and year to year. We do this work because we believe in Vermont's values of sustainability, resilience, and community, but we also depend on affordable health insurance to continue being able to do this. Until now, Vermont Health Connect has been a lifeline for us. It's allowed us to access healthcare while maintaining our independence as small business owners. However, with the recent rate changes, our monthly premium is projected to nearly triple. This drastic increase makes it impossible to afford coverage. We're now faced with an impossible choice. Do we pay for insurance that consumes a huge share of our income, or do we go without it and accept significant personal and financial risk? Without affordable health coverage, we are left vulnerable. A single medical emergency could threaten not only our health, but also our farm and our livelihood. This situation undermines the very resilience Vermont strives to foster in its people, its farms, and its local economies. What I want to emphasize today is that Vermont's independent workers are not just working for ourselves, but we're also working for the fabric of the state. We are the people who keep small towns viable where there are no large employers. We are the artisans, the tradespeoples, the farmers who bring life to the community centers of our small villages. I urge you to consider the real impact that these changes have on small-scale farmers, artists, and our independent Vermonters. Please work to ensure that Vermont Health Connect remains accessible and affordable for those of us who contribute to our communities outside of traditional employment structures. Thanks for your attention and your ongoing efforts to support Vermont's agricultural and creative communities. I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to
Missy.
answer any questions?
Any questions from the committee? We appreciate your sharing your situation, Missy. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
You're welcome to stay on the call. And I think, Graham, are you next on the list?
I think so.
Would you come on up then?
And these to chair to pass
All
around.
right.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Randy Strupna. I work at Rural Vermont. I don't think I need to say more about that now. I do want to thank you for holding this meeting today on all of these subjects. I think Rural Vermont is consolidated with almost everybody on the list I see today and echo a lot of what they bring to the table. Similar to Ryan, there's a number of changes federally we're concerned about. You could do a laundry list. I would just, a few things I want to mention, this equip caps is something we're talking about. It's a big deal for small farms. We already heard from NRCS before this that propensity is to distribute as much money as possible and start for the biggest contracts first. Fewer contracts to larger farms. So we're looking for the caps help facilitate and ensure that the money gets spread out evenly across the farms. Layoffs of USDA staffers, the proposed reorganization of the USDA, which wasn't mentioned, but I can also give you a statement from the National Community Farm Coalition about the impacts of that and concerns. The elimination of agricultural initiatives and programs to address systemic inequities related to race and gender. Migrant farm workers and other immigrants of various statuses and throughout our food and working lands. I just want to emphasize this is not just migrant workers on dairy farms. We have migrants of various statuses throughout the food system who we have heard from who aren't willing to be here today because it's too big of a risk, who are coming to us and talking about the risks they're under and the threats they're facing. Changes to SNAP. The recent hemp language, I'd love to put you all in touch with Jeffrey Pizzutello of Vermont Growers Association. I talked to him yesterday about this and they're really concerned about some of Vermont's hemp producers. One positive piece I just want to emphasize is the Local Foods Act. That is the legislation Rural Vermont's been working on with the National Family Farm Coalition and others at the federal level to basically protect Vermont's on-farm slaughter laws across the country. We now have called tricameral support in both chambers federally. So we have Senator Sanders, Welch, and Republican on the other side of the aisle in the Senate. We have the House, we have progressive Republican and Democrat support for those bills as well. So we're hoping to see that legislation move the next couple of years or a year, ideally. That would be a great thing for Vermont. I'm mostly here to talk about healthcare, which I think is the place where Rural Vermont has the most experience to talk about these subjects. Maddie said brought a lot of great things to the table. What I've handed out to you all today is the Vermont Food System Plan issue brief on healthcare. Rural Vermont was the lead author of this brief, myself and Molly Wills, in 2020, I believe. And we got involved in this issue at the time because we started realizing, healthcare is not traditionally seen as an agricultural subject, but affecting healthcare, childcare, elder care, things like this might do more for the agricultural community than affecting any particular agricultural policy. Just reading, well, I won't read it initially. I also note for you that Naomi Wilker-Acosta from Bridges to Health was also one of the contributing authors to this, and Mike Fisher, who you mentioned from the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. So these are the types of folks we worked with to inform this brief, which really describes the situation of Vermont farmers and farm workers related to healthcare as of 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm going to read just the first part of this to sort of contextualize a little bit at that time. It says access to physical and mental health care is directly connected to farm viability and quality of life. And this is really what we want you all to understand. Healthcare costs and cost of living have far outpaced gains in farm-based income and other forms of income in Vermont. This affects farmers, farm workers, and consumers, ramifications for food access to farm operations. Farm families and farm workers have difficulties accessing health insurance and healthcare due to high costs of insurance, including deductibles, copays, and policy costs, lack of or inadequate insurance coverage, and limited access to rural providers. Lack of access to affordable healthcare can impact farm productivity, hiring of farm workers, farm risk management strategies, farm transition, land access, and the need for off-farm income. In a national study, and this was 5 years ago, a majority of, or actually more than this study was longer ago, a majority of farmers reported that they couldn't withstand a major health crisis without going into debt or selling off their farm assets. In the first sentence in the section, Vermont farmers report the cost of health insurance as a major barrier to farming full-time, farming long-term, or hiring on-family employees. I'll leave that there for now, but that's just a little bit so you understand. This is a part of Vermont's state agricultural plan. Agency of Ag and otherwise. So that includes the recommendations here. So given some of that context, well, I would just, maybe another thing I want to point out is the recommendation re healthcare for farm workers, given that Naomi will be here later. And that's in the backside, I think, number 3, devote resources to working with migrant and immigrant farm workers and their advocates to address individual and structural challenges, barriers, and disparities in access to healthcare, and improve effectiveness, safety, and efficiency of healthcare services for these farm workers. And that is the work of Bridges to Health. So I'm so excited she'll be here later to talk about that. I hope that we all can find a way to support that program. Given some of this context, I came today talking, what you all have been talking about, the loss of these enhanced credits, the impending healthcare crisis. As Maddie said, Vermont is anticipating the loss of these premiums, and we're anticipating to face the biggest losses in the country. Public Assets Institute right down the road here has put out a paper on that. And we already have the highest premiums in the country, which they've also put a paper out on. According to the Public Assets Institute, middle-income participants on the exchange in Vermont are looking at an additional $10,000 a year for an individual plan and $32,000 for a family of 4. Vermont Digger reports that Vermont premium prices have doubled or more, and farmers and small business owners are some of the demographics most dependent, as Maddie rightly mentioned, nationally, the numbers around that. And I wanted to bring, we couldn't get a farmer in here, but I have some anonymized testimony. This is one farmer writing. As I am one of the many self-employed people likely to lose my health insurance from January 1st without the subsidy to make the policies affordable, I've been doing some research on what my options might be. I own a farm, so I don't want to go uninsured. Similar situation for a bunch of farmers I do agronomy and business planning consulting work with. This is someone who also works with farmers doing that kind of work. She describes the increasing cost for the only 2 healthcare providers forecast on the exchange as quote unquote out of reach for many of us, plus it's fairly useless unless we have a health catastrophe. The self-employed farm consultants and farmers won't have the income to pay those premiums if they are too sick or injured to work, so it's still debatable how useful the insurance is. The 3 other potential ideas she explores are buying a catastrophic plan, which would at least have a lower premium, joining a religious organization which quote unquote self-insures and sort of hoping for the best, anything might happen, or leaving Vermont to live in an adjacent state or Canada, which healthcare is more affordable. She says, I have a couple more quotes here. The Medicaid funds Green Mountain Care, which many Vermont farmers get their insurance through. Health insurance subsidies are provided through the Affordable Care Act and are the only way that thousands of farmers and other self-employed Vermonters are able to afford the extremely high premiums for Vermont health insurance. If the state doesn't either allow health insurance to offer a huge deductible plan with a smaller premium, or if the state doesn't figure out how to kick in some pretty substantial subsidies, a lot of us buying insurance at the exchange, Vermont Health Connect, will be uninsured at the beginning of next year. And our local hospitals and clinics may close or limit services. He says, I moved to New York, you get the same insurance for a fraction of the cost we have to pay here. So on top of affordability, she mentions the other concerns around hospitals and access. And I think you're all aware that we're seeing loss of access to essential services. In South Burlington Center, Copley closed. South Berlin inpatient, I believe, mental health facility closed. We're seeing others being threatened to close. We're seeing fewer providers rurally, and we're seeing overburdened care workers at hospitals and otherwise. And we also see these coming changes to Medicaid on the horizon. So we feel like we got to both support people in navigating this moment in the various ways we have. That's sort of reducing harm on the ground. So the Office of the Healthcare Advocate in Opa Vermont, rural Vermont, we're working with them to develop some webinars to support farmers with enrollment, with understanding changes to Medicare, and also with some tax support. We're talking to Bridges to Health about how we can support them and otherwise. So there's this place on the ground where we can sort of do work to support navigating things. But I also want to elevate that you'll see the recommendations of the state ag brief. Again, this is part of the state plan, includes universal publicly funded healthcare. And we also have an existing statute, Act 48, established a framework for a universal healthcare system in Vermont, Among its principles existing in law right now, say Vermont must ensure universal access to coverage for high quality medically necessary health insurance for all Vermonters. Systemic barriers such as cost must not prevent people from accessing necessary health care. So I think from our perspective, we are just encouraging you all to both support people navigating things in the ground, but also to be bold and look at these large structural issues that have existed for a long time. These advanced credits were already only a Band-Aid for a broken system. So we're just asking you all to reject austerity efforts, to look at progressive and equitable revenue generation as alternatives, whether that's the Fair Share Coalition, actual equitable taxation such that working class folks like farmers aren't paying more than wealthy people their fair share of taxes in this state and otherwise. Otherwise, happy to take questions. I'm really glad to be hearing from the Office of Healthcare Advocate for Just Health about SNAP, et cetera, later, and also from the folks working with our immigrant farm workers.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions? Yes, yeah, we'll scan this and post this.
Thank you all so
much. Yeah. All right, Mary White, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah, thank you for waiting patiently.
Absolutely.
And welcome. I'm not sure whether we've met before or whether you've testified, but you're now with the Farm Bureau.
Yeah, so I've testified before in many different aspects. I'm also a dairy farmer and a crop insurance agent.
Okay,
So
good, yes.
wear many hats.
Well, we've got, I think, some written testimony from you. No, well, if you've got written testimony, and this, Graham, this goes for you too, if you want to submit it, we'll post it. But Mary, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, so Amber does, or maybe you have them already in your inbox. There was some fact sheets that we sent over from USDA for the current drought relief programs that are available. So I will reference those as well. But today I really want to paint a picture of where our farmers stand in terms of this drought, how the shutdown impacted, how the changes that were referenced today in the One Big Beautiful Bill have changed some of these programs, and where do we go from here? So again, my name is Mary White. I am now the president of the Vermont Farm Bureau. I am also a small dairy farmer in Orange County, and I've worked in the agribusiness insurance industry for 15 years. As many Vermonters felt uncertainty and frustration with the government shutdown, Vermont farmers were faced with market implications, lack of resources, critical data, and left in limbo during the worst drought conditions since 1908. It couldn't have come at a worse time for the Vermont farm economy and the national economy. Our farmers are facing an economic storm right now and are barely holding on. We've had many producers and members contact us with testimony to those exact words. Production expenses are at record highs throughout all sectors of agriculture. Dairy producers watch milk prices drop by $2 a hundredweight almost overnight. Corn, soybean, and other farmers are facing low yields from drought conditions and a wet spring, and some combined with low pricing for their products. Crop insurance is a federal program. There are two main types of crop insurance program. The first is multi-peril crop insurance, which is called MPCI, and this is sold through private insurance carriers. The main crops that covers in Vermont are corn, soybeans, as well as some apples and barley. These coverages and loss payments were not impacted by the shutdown due to the fact that they are controlled by private insurance carriers. So those coverages were not disruptive from the shutdown. This would also include programs such as pasture, rangeland, and forage, which is calculated off a rain grid, not your actual harvest data. And I will note why we're talking about hemp. Hemp is an eligible MPCI crop, but not in Vermont. We should really work towards that, but there are 20 other plus states that have hemp as an eligible crop. Vermont is not one of them. The other insurance program I think you're all familiar with is NAP, Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance, which is administered by the FSA. NAP is available for most crops that aren't eligible in the previous program, including vegetables, fruit, hay. We see a lot of pumpkins as well. NAP was directly impacted by the shutdown. Claims could not be processed or paid. They are now working diligently and hard to get these claims processed, but many farmers are struggling to offset these losses out of pocket. The closure of the USD offices during harvest time created difficulties for many farmers. Vermont farmers operate in a very tight growing season. These decisions cannot be put on hold. The lack of market reports and access to funding greatly impacted farmers' decisions on planning for 2026 crop year, from seed to fertilizer to insurance and limited borrowing capacity. The current drought relief program fact sheets have been provided to you. There are 3 main programs available. The first is Livestock Forage Disaster Program, which previously required 8 consecutive weeks of drought conditions to be eligible. The One Big Beautiful Bill did change this to allow for 1 month of an eligible payment from a 4-week drought and a second payment for an eligible 8 consecutive weeks. This requires acreage reporting to FSA as well as written lease agreements for all these grazing, and it is only for grazing herds. So the main diet contributing for those livestock have to be from grazing. There is also an emergency conservation program, which is a great program, but this requires environmental review prior to the project. We are, again, grateful for these programs, but most farmers this summer were faced with the reality of drilling a well or selling the livestock. Waiting was not an option for them. And I think we all learned or have heard that well drilling is expensive. It can start anywhere from $15,000 and run up to $30,000. While we appreciate the return to work for USDA employees, critical disaster programs were halted and some pushed out from original payout dates that producers were counting on while looking at the volatility of these markets. Open enrollment for the Emergency Livestock Relief Program for the 2023 and 2024 floods are still open. So that is expected to close. It was supposed to close in October, and now it is extended to November 21st. But that is the reality these producers are living in, is that we are still looking at funding from the floods. And if we do see a drought declaration, it is going to be into the 2026 crop year, if not beyond, before we see any relief, when producers are struggling on the farm to pay for these things out of pocket to keep their farms and their families viable. We applaud the extension of the Farm Bill as a result of the reopening of the government, with continued support for these programs as well as DMC. But we need to also realize the market implications created by the potential lapse of SNAP funding that directly impacted some of these markets, including dairy. A farmer's first priority is to provide food, and SNAP is the largest portion of the Farm Bill. Food availability and security needs to be a priority, starting with the farmers that produce these products. This government shutdown undoubtedly showed why funding for the Vermont Farm Security Fund is vital for Vermont farmers, the farm economy, and Vermont's food security in real time. I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mary. Representative O'Brien.
Mary, what's happening with the American Farm Bureau? Because there are droughts everywhere. There are certainly weather incidents similar to Vermont, both too much water, too little water. So how does Vermont's role in that and vice versa work?
Yes, so we're working with AFBF on several things. One big thing was encouraging the reopening of the government and getting that extension for the Farm Bill to specifically open some of these programs for producers. We are also looking towards the One Big Beautiful Bill changes to some of these commodity prices that have been adjusted as a result. And on these programs, there was a significant portion, not significant, but there was also increased subsidy as part of the crop insurance programs, which is encouraging producers to hopefully sign up. They also increased the beginning farmer rancher threshold to allow farmers an offset in premium for, I believe, 10 years instead of 5. So there are things happening on the national level to help support producers in an event of a disaster like this, to help make resources more available and more affordable.
Okay, other questions? All right, we have more testimony. Thank you, Mary. We've got more testimony from the Farm Bureau. Amber.
I have those programs that Mary was discussing, but I can stay here, so I can just leave them.
Okay.
I will keep my testimony short. For the record, Amber Perry, Vermont Farm Bureau. I serve as the administrator and the policy director. This past growing season has been extremely hard for our Vermont farmers. The drought affected nearly every sector of Vermont agriculture. Dairy, equine, produce, hay cropping. I do want to note that we don't know the impacts on maple yet. I'm sure we'll be learning about that in the spring, so I want everyone to be aware that we should be monitoring that closely as well. The federal government shutdown compounded the struggles of our farmers. Where do they turn when they need someone to turn to the USDA? They couldn't turn there, so they were battling these challenges alone. And I also want to urge just something that we should think about. The average farmer in Vermont is 57 years old. 25% of our Vermont farmers fall in the 65 and older bracket. When we are trying to engage or figure out their struggles, we need to do so in a way that reaches them. Some of them won't pick up a phone. Some of them won't use a computer. So how else are we getting that information from them? We urge the committee to continue advocating for both federal and state level solutions that can provide short-term and long-term stability. This includes investment in water structure, drought preparedness, emergency support programs that keep our farms operating when our federal systems go unavailable. I thank you for taking the time to hear from us today, and I think the most important are the 3 stories I'm going to share with you from our members. Daryl is a livestock farmer in Rutland County. He saw impacts on pasture, hay, and water. His words: I do try to plan for a drought by banking some pastures. Regrowth was the issue for hay and pasture. I had to move cattle to our other farm across the town for a couple of weeks of pasture before having to start feeding hay early. This year, I had to purchase about $800 in hay to supplement my beef herd. I would normally have extra hay, but the second cut was pretty miserable and I had to graze the sheep on what would normally be my third cut. I was pulling water out of my stream as my upper well dropped down to about nearly 60 gallons a day. I was fortunate that we got some rain, which got the stream running again. I used a sub pump to fill a tank and then fill the water tank in the pasture. My home well is good for our home, and I try using it sparingly as it's a poor producer. I do use it yearly for yearly sheep household in the barn. I also have a 5,000 gallon underground cistern. I usually use that for livestock, but it's almost empty and I'm holding off buying water unless I have to. I have a good well in my winter feeding area. I know there are plenty of other farmers that have it much worse than I. And then I will share a story from Kelly View Farm. They are an agricultural service. They do custom cropping and manure application. I'm writing on behalf of Kelly View Farm Inc., an agriculture service provider serving producers across the Northeast Kingdom and Northern New Hampshire. I wish to inform you that the significant impact that the ongoing drought has had on our business operation, as well as the broader agricultural economy in our area. Over the past 4 months, the persistent lack of rainfall has resulted in a reduced crop acreage, lower yields, and a financial strain on many of our dairy producers. As a result, we have experienced a marked decline in sales of essential agricultural inputs and services, including manure application, grass harvesting, and corn harvesting. Compared to the same period last year, our sales have decreased by approximately 11% in the harvesting sector and 20% in the manure application sector, directly reflecting the challenges faced by local farmers. Beyond our company's immediate financial challenges, this downturn has a wider economic impact. Reduced agricultural production affects local employment, supply chains, and rural economies that depend heavily on farm-related activity. While our team continues to work closely with producers to manage input costs and to maximize limited resources, the ongoing drought has placed a sustained strain on both producers and service providers alike. Despite these challenges, we remain committed to supporting producers through flexible service options and resource management guidance. And we wanted to bring this matter to your attention as the situation underscores the continued need for drought relief initiatives and agricultural support programs at the state level. Any assistance or consideration that you can provide to help offset these adverse conditions, whether through emergency funding, loan flexibility, or drought recovery programs, would make a meaningful difference for both ag service providers and producers we serve. Thank you for the attention to this issue, for your continued support of agriculture community, and we would gladly provide any further information or meet and discuss the local impacts of the drought in greater detail.
My neighbors.
That testimony.
Yeah.
Mine has raised their hand, but it's not indicating it on the screen.
Oh, who is it?
It doesn't tell me, it's just like a raised hand.
Okay.
Usually it says.
Mary, do you want to? Yeah, okay. Representative O'Brien.
This might be a better question for Michael Fish, but you, Amber, or Mary might know. I was really interesting about how our average farmers, 25% of them are 65 or older. So is there actually an advantage with Medicare being better coverage than Medicaid when you actually get to that sort of point?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because in general, you hear, Medicaid is
Right,
always under attack, whereas Medicare maybe less so, but I don't know.
right.
Yeah.
We'll go in a few more.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Hang in there, Richard.
But it likes to be above average anyways, there you go.
And then I have one more story from a dairy farmer. Hello, my name is Catherine Rowley Bosley, recently married, a fourth generation dairy farmer on my family's farm in Milton, Rowley Brothers Dairy. Our farm recently rebuilt following our devastating fire in the spring of 2024. As we have collectively wanted to continue farming and pass the legacy on to the next generation. Following the unexplainable turmoil and the hardship of not producing milk for nearly 9 months without making an income, managing our cattle between 9 farms across the state and continuing to care for and raise for our young stock, we were finally able to bring the cows home. We are excited to be in our new facility and we continue to remain optimistic for the future of Vermont agriculture. While we continue to work through the challenges that are out of our control. Due to the drought, we had to drill a new well to feed our cattle, which at large was an unexpected expense on top of the ever-climbing expenses to allow us to properly care for our cattle and land and to continue to produce our product. In addition, our corn crop was stunted and we have less hay than in years past. As the milk market is so incredibly vital, we are another multi-generational farm that is working each and every day to produce high-quality food without the means to pay ourselves and our bills. There are federal relief programs that could help us with these circumstances. However, with the government shutdown, we were not able to apply or access this funding and to help our farm stay afloat during unusual trying times. Due to the shutdown, we were also unable to contact FSA employees to ask about the dairy margin coverage to help with the decrease in milk prices. We as dairy farmers are internally optimistic. We take pride in waking each day bright and early to care for our animals, our land, and our image. With a full heart, I can say that I love dairy farming. It is more than just a job, it is who I am. However, as we continue to face new challenges, it's becoming increasingly hard to survive and weather the literal and figurative storm, or lack thereof.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who shared
We're all
those
busy being
stories.
farmers. We just wanted to make sure we shared their stories.
So we talked a little bit about S60, which is just as a reminder that this is the Farm and Forest Relief fund bill that's in appropriations, in-house appropriations. And then there've been a couple of suggestions, I think, in the testimony that you read, Amber and Mary, you may have also alluded to a couple of other things that we could do as a state. I'm wondering whether the Farm Bureau specifically has been in touch with if there's anything you'd like to share with us about specific things that you'd like to see happen next year that might end up in the budget or the budget adjustment.
We strongly would love for F-60 to pass. Maybe we should reconsider, I'm not sure, can't recall off the top of my head, if we had the custom harvesters, expenses included in that, because they're obviously taking a financial hit as well.
Yeah, I don't know whether they were,
We talked about it, I can't remember.
I feel like they're not specifically in the language, but I don't know whether they would qualify or not the way that it's written. But something to look at then. Okay. Representative O'Brien.
Can you just give us an update on where that was at? Like, I wasn't sure if it passed, but it was unfunded, or is it just marooned and approved?
Yeah, yep.
That's as far as it got.
Sorry.
Yeah, you may remember, took some testimony on a proposed amendment that we, I think in a straw poll, we're okay with the language. And well, it was after we had voted it out and it was in appropriations. And when we get back in January, it's possible that appropriations will be interested in looking at that bill. And perhaps more so given the testimony we're hearing today, but also just everything that's out there. So that may be encouraging.
I had farmers emailing a certain member of appropriations, just letting them know how wonderful this year was going.
Any other questions for Amber or Mary? All right, thank you very much. Now, I see Sydney Collier has joined us. And I recognize the last name. Oh, okay, good. Good. Steve, hi.
Good morning.
Morning. Are you with your colleagues or are you in a separate location?
Well, I'm out of the country on vacation and they are trying to sign on from Waterbury right now.
Okay. Well, that's very generous of you to take time away from your vacation to join us this morning.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry that I'm in a t-shirt, but that's what I had.
I wasn't going to point that out, but. And I think the rest of you can fill in while we're waiting here, Steve. I think the rest of the agency, those of you who are working today are on a retreat or in an all staff meeting.
Correct.
Offsite. Yeah.
They purposely scheduled it when I wouldn't be there to ruin it.
And my understanding was that despite that some of the folks would be able to join us from Waterbury where they're meeting. So,
Right.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to get on now.
Not just yet.
Not just yet. Okay.
I know they're trying, Mr. Chair. I did get a text from people that they're working on it.
Okay. All right.
Good question. I'm sure the ag agency knows, but Maddie, what are the 6 counties that were qualifying for drought? Do you know?
All
In
the
the north?
northeastern ones, but like down to Orange, I believe.
Yeah.
And up to Essex and Orleans, but it's only part of some counties
Uh-huh.
and entire counties, I think only
So-
just Essex.
So right down to Greens, everything to the east, Orleans, Essex, Caledonia, part of Lamoille,
Washington, Orange.
maybe part of Washington and Orange. Yeah.
But not
Yeah,
your way.
that's it.
We've actually, Bennington County is I don't know what color it is on that map, but it's not, it hasn't been as dry.
No, in Franklin County. Them sons of guns. We had corn out of the ground. They had corn in the bag. And their corn went right by us. Because they get more GDUs, and then they got rain that we didn't get.
Was
There
not,
is someone who joined under just a period,
Yeah.
so perhaps that's.
So there we go. Allison. Hi, Allison.
Good morning. Anson says they are hopefully logging on soon.
Okay. All right. Are you,
We had our all agency staff meeting today, so
Yep.
they're actually waiting at Human Services to get let in the door of the building.
okay. Well, we're glad to see you, Allison, and we are, I don't know whether you had any testimony. If you, we can go ahead and have you start if there's anything that you specifically wanted to say.
Yeah, I mean, Anson was prepared to kick us off. I don't
Okay.
feel his thunder, but I certainly could.
Well,
Again,
hang on one second here. Yeah, there, I see. Yeah, good. All right.
thanks.
Good morning, Anson, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning. How are we all doing?
Good.
Good.
Are you all going to be on separate screens? Or-
I'm in Waterbury, and in the same room with me is Abby Willard and Nicole. And when it's appropriate, we can shift to them for their part of the program. We also have remotely Deputy Eastman and also Steve Collier. They're in 2 different locations.
They've already checked in.
Okay.
And we might as well jump right in. I know that you've got a lot to share. I will just say that we've heard testimony this morning. You've probably seen the agenda, but we've had, our conversations have been about the drought, about the pending loss of the premium tax credits on the impact on farmers. We heard from the federal delegation with some detail on what's in the bill that did pass the House and Senate earlier this week, and how that will impact the agriculture community in the state. But and we're happy to hear on all those subjects and any others that you've got. We're as I've said at the start of the day, we have a lot and not enough time to cover all of it today. So while we would hope to wrap up around noon, if we get to noon and there's still important things that you need to share with us, we will try and accommodate.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. Thank you for allowing us to be with you remotely. Today is our all agency meeting. So the entire agency is meeting in the Waterbury complex, and we're joining you from Human Services today. So thank you for the accommodation, allowing us to testify remotely. Again, for the record, Anson Tebbets with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I want to just update you on a few things related to disaster relief, the drought, and some federal issues. I'm joined here in Waterbury with our Ag Development Director, Abby Willard, and also Operations Director, Nicole Dubuque. And joining us remotely is Deputy Secretary Allison Eastman and our General Counsel, Steve Collier. Let's begin with some recent federal news. Federal government is now open again, and that is good news for the agency, for Vermonters, and everyone that's related to USDA involvement. Under the bill passed and signed into law Wednesday night, the Farm Bill receives a 1-year extension. That means if there are future disagreements or potential shutdowns, USDA will remain funded through October of 2026. This provides some much needed predictability and stability for our farm community and those that rely on the federal USDA programs. We are still reviewing the details of the bill, but overall, it's encouraging news, ensuring again predictability until at least October of 2026. The shutdown did temporarily impact our negotiations over a block grant that's coming to Vermont in response to the severe weather of the 23 and 24. Despite that, we are pleased to report the agency successfully negotiated a $30 million assistance package that will be for 23 and 24 disaster relief. These funds will eventually come to the Agency of Agriculture and be distributed back to the farm community. We still have a few steps to finalize in that package, but work continues on that contract, and we will resume meetings with USDA beginning next week. I want to highlight that USDA FSA also has their own agreements that may be helpful in the meantime for disaster relief. This is above and beyond that. So there may be instances where FSA, USDA may be able to step in and help what's happening now with the drought and also other programs through 23 and 24. But this is a separate block grant that will come to the Agency of Agriculture, and then we'll distribute those funds to farmers in the farm community. And FSA, USDA may have some other programs that they will be doing over the next year or so. Back to the drought. Unfortunately, the summer of 25 was not kind to our farmers and our producers. We did experience a severe drought, and although recent rains have helped somewhat, the growing season has ended and the losses remain significant. The agency currently has a survey to assess the full impact of the drought, and Abby Willard will share some of the details a bit along in this program in a moment. In addition, the legislation that you did approve last session and was supported by the governor and the agency is already being implemented to address severe weather impacts. VEDA launched a relief program 2 weeks ago to assist farmers affected by the drought. Farmers can apply for up to $100,000 in assistance to help with that recovery. Anyone interested should contact VEDA directly, but that program is up and running, and if farmers or producers need some assistance in the meantime, VEDA has that program up and running. Those are a couple of our highlights. If it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I could turn it over to Nicole or Abby for some more details on the block grant that is coming, or also if you want more details on what we're hearing about the drought and the impact. It is significant. It is going to be a multi-million-dollar loss to our farm community. In some areas, it hit harder than others, but essentially it's a statewide impact. So happy to do that, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have for me at this time.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I think we would love to hear from both Nicole, and maybe start with the good news on the block grant.
Yeah, going to switch seats here, and everyone, this is Nicole. She's our operations director in New Jersey. She's going to take the chair here, and she can give you an update of how the negotiations are going on with USDA, FSA, and those began essentially today, and we're going to have a meeting with the Washington folks next week. So I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. First testimony of the year. So for the record, Nicole Dubuque, Operations Director for the Agency of Agriculture. I can start by talking about the Disaster Relief Block Grant, which myself and the rest of New England, we refer to it as the 220 Block Grant because it comes from an allotment of funds that were in the continuing resolution in December of 2024, specifically for $220 million for disaster relief for 2023 and 2024 weather events that happened in New England, Hawaii, and Alaska. So we have been working with our other New England states, kind of working out what we need and developing plans with the Farm Service Agency including providing data for what the total losses and damages were for Vermont. Ultimately, we were tentatively awarded $31.7 million that we are currently negotiating with USDA to put into a grant. And once the grant is executed, we would be able to access the administrative funds as part of that grant, and then be able to move forward with establishing the program and getting that up and running. The eligibility criteria for that funding will specifically be for any producer that incurred damage or loss due to weather events that happened in Vermont during calendar year 2023 or calendar year 2024. As I said, we haven't established the full work plan yet. So as far as what the maximums will be and what we will need as far as supporting documentation for that, that has not been established or approved by USDA at this time. But ultimately, the main focus of this block grant will be on infrastructure loss and then also on market loss. And there are some other subcategories that we could talk about as we get further into the work plan. I do want to also mention, just outside of the block grant, because I know that you all might question, why aren't we directly covering crops when that was a huge loss for us? And that's because USDA also has another program that they're running in Vermont called SDRP, which is the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program. And that is a program that's run directly from Farm Service Agency, and producers would go to them to apply for that program. And the focus of that is crops. So that's my summary. I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, great. Thank you. Representative O'Brien?
Nicole, so would that cover that early frost that was so devastating to orchards and fruit, or would those producers more likely have to apply for that second federal program you just mentioned?
Nope. Any weather event that happened in calendar year 2023, it does not have to be specific to the flood. So yes, if there were infrastructure damage or loss or market loss due to the frost, we could absolutely cover that. And I think we'll probably see that from a lot of orchards and vineyards.
Right. Can you explain a little bit more the distinction between market loss and crop loss?
Sure. So market loss is less about the actual crop being lost and more about exactly what it is market loss. Sorry, not to be too obvious, but if we're talking about orchards, for example, right? A lot of them run on a pick your own model. And so it's not necessarily about them losing the apples. It's about there was damage to the area of the orchard that made it so people couldn't walk down there. They couldn't do different activities that would get people to come in and pick the apples and buy the apples. That's kind of my standard example that I give. So they lost that market essentially, right? They couldn't do their pick your own for the year. They couldn't bring people in or open their farm stand during that time. So they lost a market of people that would normally come in and buy the value added products and pay for the pick your own, that type of thing. So it can be a little bit of a gray area, and we're working on making sure that our definitions are clear.
Sticking with the apple orchard illustration, then if you had a different orchard model, where the business model where there was no pick your own or no farm stand, but they just sold all they produced to wholesaler retailers, are they going to be eligible for the block grant funding, or would they have to turn to that other program?
So that's a kind of a nuanced question. So I think if we could say there was a market loss because they couldn't, sell the item or they couldn't access the crop, then we could talk about how that works. But generally speaking, if they had normally been doing like a wholesale operation, for example, and they just lost the crop and couldn't fill their contract, they would likely have to go to SDRP. But I think it's going to be very individualized.
Representative Nelson, thank you, Nicole.
Nicole, so with people that got flooded out, let's say up there on the Winooski River with the vegetable farms, and they lost their crop. And there is no federal insurance program for that. They lost the ability to have farmers markets or their farm stands. Is this program for help fulfill that law?
So if they weren't able to participate in the farmer's market, or the farmer's market that they would normally sell their crop at can't happen? Is that
Well, they had no crop to sell. You know,
yeah, so that's
because
what,
there is no insurance program for them, and I don't know if they fall under the disaster relief, whatever acronym they pulled out of NASA for.
so my understanding is that if it is purely a crop loss, either they couldn't grow it or they lost the field and they couldn't ever, they never got to the point of harvest, right? Then my understanding is that they would go to SDRP if they in fact had some of the crop and they can show that the farmer's market that they normally sell it at could not be held because of weather events. That would be more of a market loss. And I want to be clear, we're still working on the definitions of this. So I don't want to go too far in the weeds and confuse people, but I think that's kind of where the line is like, can they show that a market was lost for the product that they're growing, or the commodity that they're growing?
In terms of eligibility then, Nicole, it sounds like, I know I'm thinking back to 2023 July or August, so not the heavy frost, but the heavy rain. And the agency began seriously reaching out, collecting lost data, and then the BGAP program, I think, was a response to that. If someone didn't participate in that or didn't submit any information at the time, would they still be potentially eligible, qualifying?
My understanding from Farm Service Agency is yes, that they are really focused on making sure that somebody isn't double dipping, so to speak, like they're not using two USDA programs to get paid for kind of the same loss. But as far as them participating in a state program, that doesn't change their eligibility to participate in the federal program, is what we received for an answer on that question.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions or anything else you wanted to add, Nicole?
I don't think so. I'm very excited that we're going to start conversation again and have our weekly meetings again with USDA next week, and happy to keep you all as updated as possible as we go forward. I think we're pretty close to having a grant agreement.
Okay, well, we're not going to hold you to that just because we've been hearing about this for a while.
I know.
It will be nice if it actually happens. Representative O'Brien.
Just quickly, Nicole, does the agency have estimates of how much was lost on the farm side during those 2 years?
Yeah, so we estimated it between 50 to 60 million, and we've really held to the 50 million kind of being what we would say is a really solid estimate of actual losses. That said, there is a ripple effect, right? Of if you don't have a market one year and you have to get back into it and you have to get your field back in order to grow, all of those things that I'm sure you guys are all aware of. So, we've got estimates of kind of the total damage being much higher than that, but that was our ask of USDA, was 50 million.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, then maybe we could have you turn it over to Abby. And I know that the agency has set up a survey and a website that shows in real time the results or the information that's been turned in there. And I think Abby's going to talk a little bit about that and maybe other things. Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, for the record, Abby Willard, Agency of Agriculture. Nice to see you all. And yeah, it feels early to begin testimony, but speaking about the droughts, we're in factor to give you an update on. So there's a few pieces I can speak to around kind of national conditions that we know and national data around how Vermont fares nationally. So we are third in the nation currently based on National Drought Monitoring Index for the impact of this past growing season. That puts us just behind Maine and New Hampshire, but ahead of states like Arizona and New Mexico. So that gives you a sense of the severity of the growing season and the summer season that we had here in Vermont. Producers started communicating, at least with our agency, in July that they were starting to see effects from the flood, even though when you look at precipitation rates, we were in some degree of a drought over the winter. So in January, February of 2025. And then we had our spring rains and we got a bunch of water in Vermont. And then beginning in August, September is when we started to move into extreme drought. Currently, our current conditions are that 41% of the Vermont is still in an extreme drought and 99% of the state is considered to be in a moderate drought. Early in the summer, we knew that we would do a survey to capture ag drought impact data to be self-reported by the ag community. And we chose to wait until later in the summer, later in the field season, after businesses would have an actual sense of what the loss was that they were experiencing on the farm. And so we made a decision to release the ag drought impact for 2025 survey on October 17th. And prior to that time, I just think it's important to note that we received many calls at the Agency of Agriculture and lots of inquiries about the need for water. So there were a lot of wells that were dry, a lot of water hauling needs that were requested by the industry, and concerns about feed quality and quantity. So we also relaunched our Feed Finder directory for helping businesses be able to respond to both of those kind of like immediate needs that were being experienced throughout the summer. The survey that was launched in October was really targeting the agricultural community that were growing crops or raising livestock for sale and consumption beyond their family. So really not targeting kind of like a backyard operation for personal use. It did capture equine operations, so other livestock that wasn't intended to be consumed for food, but not the forestry sector. So that kind of gives you a sense of the audience that the survey was targeting. And then 10 days later, we launched a live dashboard. So both the survey, which is still active, it's open until December 15th, and a live dashboard that shows the results as they're coming in daily are available on our website. So you can get to it by going to agriculture.vermont.gov and then /drought. So in early January, I think we could feel prepared to share a final report that can kind of capture all the anecdotes and all the collective data once the survey is closed. But we wanted to share a few of the highlights that we've received in responses to date. So as of this morning, there's 163 responses to the survey. There's responses from every county but Essex. The majority of the responses are submitted from Addison and Rutland counties. And when asked about the impact of the survey, most respondents are saying it's a loss of crop yields for either feed or for market and insufficient pastures for forage, which both of those are challenging conditions going into winter and towards the financial viability and health of our ag businesses. There's quite a few references to livestock water and crop irrigation challenges throughout the season as well. 56 folks that have responded to the survey reported having to haul water throughout some portion of this growing season. And some were forced to pump from alternative water sources because their primary or available water sources had gone dry. The 163 responses self-report over 65,000 acres of impact due to the drought this season, with a total estimate of over $13 million in losses. 60% of the respondents claim that this is the worst drought they've ever seen in Vermont. And 55%, so just a simple majority of the respondents claim either moderate to severe feed shortage impacts, which means that they'll either need to buy more feed, or the loss of feed or the poor quality of feed will impact their business viability. When we look at the responses, a majority, about 75% of the responses come from an equal split of livestock, dairy, and produce operations. And then the remaining 25% is a mix of diversified farms and the maple industry, and then folks that are just cropping hay, soybean, other crops. 53% of the respondents so far are small farm operations, so a mix of the size, but still a majority being our small farms. 64% of respondents claim they don't have crop or livestock insurance, and 72% of respondents haven't yet reported their drought impacts to other entities. We asked 2 questions about kind of like the impact that this drought may be having on their business, for businesses to kind of just like give us a sense of what any anticipated business changes that they anticipate making. Some of the top answers have been investing in water resource management practices, so either irrigation, digging additional wells, sort of looking at their long-term water resource availability. Others recommended or considered purchasing surplus feed beyond the needs that they might typically anticipate, with the assumption that we'll see similar weather patterns like this into the future. Some respondents are acknowledging that they plan to make changes to their herd size, so culling animals going into the winter, or changing the scope of crop production in response to the difficulties of this drought season. Others talked about planning to implement new soil building conservation practices as a way to try to kind of retain and best utilize soil and moisture retention in their cropland. And then another question that could be of value, I think, to this committee is the supports that businesses claim that they could benefit from. A few comments around needing to look at some new seeding of drought-tolerant species and forage varieties, so not really sure what the long-term impact of drought conditions may be on their pasture or cropland, but starting to look at some different seed and species compositions. 50% of respondents said that financial assistance will be helpful to their business. And we asked a question around how quickly they anticipate heading into a kind of like a crop or a financial circumstance where they won't be able to recover. And you can see some of those response ranges on the dashboard. There was comments about the concern of lingering effects of the drought into the next year that could affect soil health, whether they did any overgrazing this fall, and how long it will take for water resources to recover for surface water or groundwater. Few comments about needing to use a line of credit to purchase additional feed to make it through the winter, and then needing to pay down that line of credit, and with low milk prices, feeling like that'll be difficult to do. So those are some of the overarching themes. And then if you're open, I have about a half a dozen kind of like anecdotes that I wanted to share from different types of operations located throughout the state that I think could also kind of capture some of the conditions that we're hearing from survey respondents. One is a livestock operation in Derby. And so again, these are kind of their narrative responses in the survey. We attempted to redig 2 springs, had to haul water twice a week for 13 weeks. We had a well drilled that didn't have water after 605 feet, and then we had to frack the well and received 3 gallons per minute to supply both the farm and the farmhouse. Another small dairy farm in Paulet said they just harvested 125 acres of soybeans, and their yield was 38 bushels per acre. And they typically see yields over 55 bushels per acre, having grown soybeans in Vermont for 6 years now. Their corn harvest was 2/3 their normal harvest. and estimated losses at that farm on over 700 acres. A crop and livestock farm in Hardwick said that their spring went dry during this field season, and the spring has never gone dry in over 100 years of cultural memory on that farm. They normally graze stockpiled forage until snowfall, which usually happens around the end of November. And this year, the farm needed to start feeding hay on October 10th. A produce farm in Chittenden County reported these climate conditions are testing the viability of farms in Vermont. We have drastic yield reductions from late summer on and impacting our volume and quality. We stopped going to farmers market and reduced our wholesale presence as well. We have minimal frozen products stored for winter sales and for income of our value-added products. Just a few more. Addison County Crop Farm reported over $400,000 loss in production losses and over $200,000 in incurred costs on over 1,700 acres. Private crop insurance doesn't touch the levels needed to continue our operation. We indicate going negative in cash flow in less than 1 month. Our business was also impacted by the 23 flood, the 24 windstorm, the 2025 spring rains, and early frost. A Christmas tree producer in Orange County. We're a startup Christmas tree farm and just planted 3 years ago. We lost every tree that we planted this year due to the drought. Last two, if we can handle two more. An Addison County dairy reported this drought is double whammy for the pastured dairy industry. Pastures were completely dormant by July 10th this summer, which reduced our cash flow for summer by about $600 per week. We'll go through winter with no second or third cut hay, and so our winter production, milk production will be reduced as well. We don't have money for purchased hay because the summer impacts on cash flow have already shrunk our bank account quite a bit. And then the last example I wanted to share with you was from a Franklin County sugar maker that says that the lands of their sugaring operation were saturated until the second week in July, and then it quickly turned dry in August. This severe drought will affect the amount of sap we'll likely to receive in the spring, which will either shorten the season or we may produce less syrup, which will be a devastating loss to our business. If we see some weather change and get some rain now through November before the trees freeze, we may be spared, but we've not had the rain we need to put more moisture into the ground for the trees to absorb. I can't put a dollar amount on the previous question of the total losses for our business until we see what the season brings. So those are the most disheartening, but also descriptive examples of some of, I think, the worst case, but also commonly occurring experiences that we were hearing and seeing reported across the state around the impact of 2025, on top of, 2 previous years and calendar years of challenging natural disasters and weather events as well.
All right, thank you for sharing those. I think it's very helpful to hear specific stories. We hear the drought and it's causing harm and difficulty for folks, but hearing specifics is great. Committee members have questions about any of that? The survey is still open, Nicole, or sorry, Abby?
Yes, yeah, the survey is open until December 15th, so for another month.
Representative Nelson.
Just a couple statements. I want to thank Abby and the whole team at the agency for being proactive with this drought and getting the word out and trying to find the help and, when FSA, doing the work they've done, and I think I'm hoping, down the road, there's relief from the federal government. Also, last week was the American Dairy Expo, and Abby was there, and Anson, Laura Ginsburg, and Cheryl Kelly, and it was just a great show. And I want to thank the agency's involvement in that, and it was really nice, and I hope it comes back again. And I thank you all for that. It was a great show. Everything you could imagine in dairy farming was there. And although everyone said, well, the price of milk says we're not buying anything this year, it was nice to see what's there to drive efficiencies and for water quality and everything else to do with dairy farming. Excellent show. Thank you for your help with that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. I think our understanding is the expo will be back next year. We're excited about that as well. And it did have the feel of a nice celebration of the dairy industry. I think it was fun to see people out. It was nice to see you, Representative. It was a nice day. I think it was, I think the attendance was relatively low. I think there's like additional promotion and advertisement we could do about the expo to have more producers in attendance and partners and stakeholders, but there were great vendors there. The buildings were full. There was a lot of information being shared, and exciting to have the American Dairy Expo choose to host an event like that in Vermont and celebrate our dairy industry.
Go ahead, Representative Morgan.
It was advertised, I saw it on Across the Fence, and it was in Essex at the fairgrounds, but I didn't see much advertisement for its happening. And I think that's something that should be considered in the future.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback. I mean, we were a first-time partner with the American Dairy Expo this year. And I think we're getting a sense of the role that we can play in doing more marketing and promotion of this event in the future.
Thank you.
I was there all day. And I saw everything, but got into very little of it. It's a 2-day event and you could spend your first day looking and then your second day diving deeper into who you want to talk to. It was really, really good.
Abby, I don't know if your colleagues are still there in the room with you, and if there's anything else that anyone would like to say. We are at the top of the hour.
Okay.
But while you have our attention and vice versa, I don't want to wrap up until we've just heard if there's anything else that you'd like to share.
Secretary Tebbetts, Nicole and I are okay. I feel like we gave you a good introduction, certainly more conversations on the drought and on the assistance for the industry in the coming months. I don't know if Deputy Eastman or Steve Collier have anything more they want to offer.
I think the only point that I would make is when we talk about crop insurance is just noting that it's based on the last 5 years of crops. And so with this year being so devastatingly low, we probably all should be aware that it's going to bring down their yield average for the following 5 years, which we hear a lot of concern about too. Not something we can fix on the state level, but something we should be aware of. So that's unfortunate when we have a year like this growing. And secondly, just thank you for taking the time today to have this discussion. Obviously, we spent many days talking to farmers, and it's been great to see the survey results and the live dashboard. So I'm happy to get anybody that info should they wish to see it and can't find it. Just send me an email.
Okay, thank you. Steve, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to talk a little bit about S60, but I won't, given the time, but I would love to continue that conversation with the committee. But for today, I just really, like my colleagues, want to appreciate all of your dedication and attention and to coming to work early, to think about these issues, and also just to highlight what Abby talked about a bit. The devastation to our farms 3 years in a row is really concerning. And a much bigger picture is not particularly better in terms of our farms just struggling on a day-to-day basis, and our loss of farms and farmland in Vermont is just something that we're watching it happen in slow motion, and it doesn't often meet the top of the political agenda. So anything that all of us can do working together to make sure that we continue to have viable farms in Vermont is I think it's critically important. It has been for a long, long time. It continues to be, and I think it seems to be that in some ways we're at an inflection point where our farms are doing wonderful things and adapting and meeting the need, and they're feeding us, but they're still suffering harm in a way that just often doesn't feel sustainable. So the more that we can do together to keep farming viable in Vermont, the better off we'll all be. So thank you so much for all your dedication and work toward that end.
All right, good. Well, thank you, Steve, for taking time off from your day off, your vacation, and to the rest of the staff for stepping away from your previously scheduled all agency meeting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
We will, we'll break now for lunch.